This is Dr. Karen, and you are listening to the Facto Leaders Podcast on the B Podcast Network, where I share up-to-date, evidence-based practices, my own experiences, and guest interviews designed to help pediatric therapists, educators, and aspiring school leaders design services that support social, emotional, and academic growth and set kids up for success in adulthood. Whether you want to learn effective strategies for your therapy session or classroom, be an influential leader on your team, or find creative ways to use your skills to advance in your career, I've got you covered. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Karen, and welcome to episode 208 of the Facto Leaders Podcast on the B Podcast Network. Having someone observe your therapy room or classroom can feel awkward, whether it's your boss doing your evaluation or whether it's a special service provider who's supporting students in your class. But when I've talked to administrators and service providers about classroom observations, they say it can be a learning curve for the person coming into the classroom as well. Yet having another set of eyes on your students can often be a valuable learning experience for both the person observing and the person being observed. That's why I invited John Mihalyo to the Facto Leaders Podcast to talk about how school leaders can turn observations into meaningful learning experiences instead of an obligation. We also talk about what it takes to start new programs and initiatives and how to take a proactive approach when it comes to marketing and communication. John Mihalyo is a highly accomplished education professional and the visionary founder of Elementary Advancement Solutions, a leading educational consulting company dedicated to empowering Catholic and faith-based school leaders. With a robust background encompassing over 2 decades of experience as an administrator and 15 years as a Catholic school principal, John has honed his expertise in addressing the multifaceted challenges encountered by educational leaders. John is also the host of the Catholic School Leaders Podcast on the B Podcast Network. In this conversation, we discuss why good school leaders visit classrooms before the official employee evaluation, why starting a new program in a school can be a 3-year process or sometimes more, the importance of marketing and communication for both staff and community, and the difference between running a public, private, and faith-based school. Be sure to check the show notes for all the places you can go to connect with John, as well as to listen to my interview with John on the Catholic School Leaders Podcast, where we talk about supporting students' executive functioning through universal classroom supports. Before we get going, I wanted to mention the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers put executive functioning intervention and support in place in collaboration with their school teams. In this conversation with John, we talk about just how long it takes to put new programming in place. Sometimes when hiring new staff is involved, it can be up to a 3-year process. Now, if you are a related service provider and you want to just make some programming changes or get teachers on board with doing some interventions in the classroom, it doesn't necessarily have to take that long. But sometimes if you are developing both your clinical skills and thinking about direct intervention, and then also having to think about other service delivery models, such as going into classrooms or coaching and training teachers, it can be a lengthy process. And that's why I say that when you're thinking about executive functioning, it's definitely something that requires long-term planning and not just short-term lesson plans. So I help you through all of that in the School of Clinical Leadership. To learn more about the program, you can go to drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership. Now, please enjoy this conversation with John Mihalyo. Today, I am joined by John Mihalyo from the Catholic School Leaders Podcast and the president and founder of Elementary Advancement Solutions. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's great to see you again. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Hanging in there, as always.
Awesome. Well, it's good to see you again. It's good to talk with you.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited to hear all get into our conversation today. So I guess before we start off, I would love to hear just if you could share who you are, what you do, and maybe just some backstory, starting off at the beginning of your career to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so my name is John Mihalyo, as you said. I'm president and founder of Elementary Advancement Solutions, and what I do now is work with Catholic schools and faith-based schools, but primarily Catholic schools, really on that business side of education, where helping with marketing, enrollment strategies, advancement strategies, including fundraising, things like that. Also strategic planning, just to make sure that there's that vision moving forward. And I like to work with schools that are really maybe struggling a little bit, really just kind of needed to find themselves and learn some new strategies and to help them grow. So that's what I'm doing now. Prior to this, I was a Catholic school principal for 15 years. Catholic school principal in three different schools and two different dioceses, all age levels, high school, K-8, preschool. Well, we had a preschool at two of them. So kind of done a little bit of everything there. And prior to that, was an elementary assistant principal for 5 years, where I worked very closely with special education, and so that's kind of where my passion comes from. That, and prior to that, was a teacher for 5 years, taught gifted and talented, as well as social studies. So a lot of different
Mhm.
tools in the toolbox, and a lot of different experiences that have gotten me to the point where I am today.
Yeah. So it's interesting because normally when people tell their story, they go chronological and you went the other way around. So
I don't know what that means. Makes me left or right brained. I don't know.
I don't know, but yeah, I always find that when I start chronologically, I never get to the end. Like the backstory goes too long, but yeah, so I know that there's so many different things that we can talk about today, but I think one of the things that I always like to ask people who are in leadership positions when they've made that transition from somebody who is working directly with students, whether they're a therapist or a teacher, and then they transition to assistant principal or special ed coordinator or some other administrative role. Just like what surprised you when you made that transition? So you're a teacher and then you transition to assistant principal. I mean, yeah, I guess let's start there. I'm just curious, what are some things that administrators have to handle that you just didn't know about because you hadn't done it?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that surprised me was you think you're doing a knockout job with, students that may need some additional support or resource help or things like that. And you think you're implementing all the strategies perfectly. Nobody's doing this better than me. And then when you go and you become an assistant principal, especially when my was really in the special education realm, you
Hmm.
start to kind of get to see what a lot of other people are doing, and you go, "Oh, I wish I would have done that. Oh, I wish I would have gone to
Interesting.
see this teacher. Oh, I wish."
Yeah.
So to me, one of the biggest things I kind of took from that was the value in having your teachers observe each other
Mm.
to see what everybody else is doing. And I guess even with my role as a principal, we have a lot of talented people in our building that we should be learning from each other, but we don't give them that opportunity to teach each other. Or maybe there's a little bit of reservation on behalf of a teacher. Go, no, I don't want to present in front of my colleagues. But
Hmm.
there's so many things that our teachers know, that are in their toolbox that they could share with others, which just makes your building stronger. And guess what? That doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
So I think one of
Yeah.
the things that I really took from that transition was just the value in seeing what's happening in other people's classrooms, but also seeing kind of the why and the discussions that go on, with parents to understand how we got to that point. Because I think sometimes as teachers, we get a list of accommodations or things of that nature. Well, what have but when you get into the conversations to understand the why behind it and how it's going to benefit the child and looking at the testing data, you understand more about why we're getting to that point, why it's happening. And the some of the things are just best teaching practices.
Hmm.
Okay. But
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
things are, hey, this is a child that specifically needs this because they're struggling in this area, and you see the discrepancy in their testing data. Okay, this is what it is. So I think that was one of the things too that I really learned a lot more was just kind of that why behind everything. Rather than just getting the piece of paper to say, hey, this kid's got to sit in the front row. This one's got to
Mhm.
have extra time on the test. This one's going to have read a lot. You're understanding the why that goes into that, which allows you to then educate your teachers to maybe bring more of those strategies into play for all students, which is a win for everybody. So yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing I learned when I made that transition. It was very eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you can get out of your classroom or your therapy room and then see what other people are doing. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing that I've noticed just from talking to people all over, all over the United States, and there are some similarities, but then also it's like, oh wow, things are different in different classrooms in different states and different countries, and yeah, so I'm all
And
for
I
that.
and yeah, and I think the value in I don't know what it is. I'm not sure whether it's ego or whether it's fear or what it
Hmm.
is, but just that and when you can get your faculty to the point where they say to another person, "Hey, Karen, can I come observe your room to
Hmm.
see what you're doing?" That's trust as
Yeah.
well, because it's my trust to actually come to you to say, I'm going to feel vulnerable enough to say I can learn from you. But then you're trusting me to say, wow, I feel comfortable enough for you to come into my classroom and watch what I'm doing and not judge me. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the natural tendency for people is there's somebody strange in my classroom that I don't have in here every day. Are they judging me? Are they saying that I'm not doing this well or whatever it might be? But I think that creates a great deal of trust amongst your faculty as well, which is a win-win when you talk about school culture.
Yeah, I know that. So I used to do that when I was in the schools, and I did for speech and language services. It's referred to as the 3-to-1 model or
Mhm.
flexible service delivery, where you've got 3 weeks of direct intervention, and then the fourth week is you're out doing consult or you're in the classrooms. And the way that I framed it for teachers was, I want to come see what you're doing so I can have a better understanding of what to do when your students come to see me. So it was very much like, I want to learn from you, not I'm going to come into your classroom and tell you how you should be doing things. Even though sometimes people would, after we would have that relationship, say, come to me for things, but that's not how I framed it for people. And it seemed to get a better response when I said, when I was asking for help, which sounds a little counterintuitive when you put the other person in the position of being the helper rather than you telling them what to do as the outside person potentially coming in, the special ed person. So
And,
I
and
always
there's
got a
and
better
there's no
response.
better way. Yeah, and there's no better way to, especially when you're new to a building.
Yeah.
I will bet you 90% of the time. I'm not gonna say 100% of the time, but I'll bet you 90% of the time you can identify your rock star teachers because they're the ones that after you go into that room, they're going to come to you and they're going to go, "Hey, what did you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? Any advice that I think I could do with
Yeah.
this, or what did you think of the
Hmm.
way I did this?" They're always looking to learn,
Hmm.
and those are going to be your teachers that are going to be your leaders who are going to take your school from good to great because they're always looking to improve not only what they're doing, but to make the school better.
Hmm.
And they're always asking questions to improve themselves. And so I would always find that when I would go and just pop into a classroom or do an observation or things like that, I wouldn't have to seek the teacher out to say, "Hey, let's go over what I saw." They would come to me and go, "Hey, what did you think of this? I tried this today. I tried this with something different. What did you think of that? Or did you have your recommendations for me here?" That would to me was always a characteristic of a strong teacher was somebody that was willing to learn and continue to grow. Didn't think they know it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that it's important to have that culture to have somebody invite someone into their classroom or their therapy room. And I mean, I guess for me, there was the principal who I reported to, who obviously they have to do their evaluations, but then there was a coordinator who was supposed to be a support person. And I one time said, I would like another set of eyes on this group of students. Can you just come in and hang out with me for a day and observe and let me know what you think if I'm on the right track? And it was a different, I don't know. I think I probably could have. I felt comfortable enough with my principals that I would have done that with them, but yeah, I just asked this other person because she was in my discipline. So it's nice when you have those people identified and when it's encouraged to do.
Yeah.
So,
And I used to always like sometimes if I would have a new assistant principal, if you had a teacher that you knew was very comfortable with things, to say, let's go in and observe this person together. And yeah, obviously you're going to tell the teacher
mhm,
ahead of time, we're both going to come in and observe you. And then the question after was, okay, what did you see? Okay.
mhm.
And it was a great way because oftentimes when as an administrator, you go in when you're new and you watch what the teacher's doing. And after you've been through some observations, you start to focus less on what the teacher's doing and more on what the kids are doing.
Yeah.
And that's where the real observation is going on. Okay, the teacher's doing a great job teaching the lesson, but what's happening at the seats? What's happening at the groups or the tables or things like that? When the kids are divided into the groups, are they actually doing what they should be doing, or are they goofing around looking up, who's the college football rankings or things like that? I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. But
Yeah.
but so that's how you can tell where the effectiveness is coming in. But it was always great to say, what did you see? And let me tell you what I saw. And it was always great because even somebody that was a new or newer administrator who hadn't done this for a while, they had a different approach to it. So
Hmm.
even as a principal, for me, it was something interesting because I was learning something from them as to their approach to it, which just helped me grow as an administrator.
I've heard some people say that when they observe, they face away from the teacher or they just look at the students, or maybe that's not their evaluation, like maybe that's not part of your official observation, but it's something they do as a professional development activity for their staff, that they just go in and I'm not necessarily going to focus on what the teacher's doing and I'm just going to see what's happening in the class. So I thought that was kind of interesting, that that's a different way to look at it.
Your best way and your most effective observations that you will have are when you, as a principal, are in your classrooms all the time, not to
Hmm.
do observations.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm.
because there's if when you go into a classroom as a principal and you've visited that classroom once the whole year and it's March, okay, and you walk in, the first thing out of the teacher's mouth is going to be, look, Mr. Mihalyo is here to join us today. He's going to be doing an observation because they're nervous. They don't feel
Yeah.
good about you being in the room because you've never been there
Right.
before.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're in the room just informally, just to do a pop in, just to see what the kids are doing, just to converse with the kids, just to visit with them, just to say, hey, read a story, I don't know, whatever the case might be. But if you're in there frequently, your observations become very less stressful.
Hmm.
And what
Yeah.
to me, what would make up a great observation too is when a teacher would say to you, hey, I've never done this lesson before. Will you come observe me during this?
Hmm.
Okay. Because everybody has those lessons that are their favorite
Yeah.
lessons, right?
Nobody does it the first time when they know they're
Nobody,
going to be. Yeah.
exactly. Hey, this is my great lesson, and everybody loves this every year. And I would say, then why do you
You
want me
go
to
with the
observe that
safe
one? You already
bet.
know it's good. You know
Yeah.
it's good, okay?
Yeah.
But that's how you create a good culture is when your teachers feel comfortable of coming to you saying, I've never done this lesson before, or I'm going to try something different. Will you come in and observe this so that you can give me feedback on it? And that right there is a win for everybody because your teacher
Mhm.
feels confident in knowing they can come to you and ask you to come do that observation. You're feeling confident because you're going to get to go in and give some great feedback, and that's just going to make your school better for your kids. That's what it's all about right there.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good litmus test of how comfortable are your staff if they ask you to come in the first time that they've tried something when it's going to be a little rough. I mean, for the majority of people, or at least, not
But that's growth,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So,
right? I mean, that's what you want is you want if I'm already good at something, why would I, it used to always make me chuckle when you would get goals at the beginning of the year. Okay, what are your goals? Well, I want to do this, this, and this. And I would say, but you're already good at those things. Yeah.
yeah, that's
Then why are they your
interesting.
goals? Like,
Hmm.
is your goal just to say, yeah, I did a rock star job at the end of the year? Or is your goal to say, I'm going to take on something that's going to challenge me and stretch me as a professional to grow and to be better? And maybe at the end of the year, I'm going to say to you, hey, I only got 50% of the way there. So now I'm going to bring this back next year as a goal. I think sometimes we think that we have to hit every single one of them and be 100% by the end of the year. And sometimes it's just not the case because sometimes we set the goal too high, sometimes it was too lofty. Other times we say, wow, it's October and we've already hit the goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then you went
And
the other, you went too safe
yeah,
in that case.
exactly.
Hmm.
It's like the joke I always says, like in the show The Office, when Creed's goal was to do one cartwheel before the end of the year. For those people that watch The Office, if your only
I
goal is
forgot
to do
about
one
that one.
cartwheel during one cartwheel, then you're probably not gonna probably didn't set the bar very high on that one.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely not. So when you were in the assistant principal role, and I know that this varies, like when I was in a small district and we didn't even have an assistant principal, so the principal did
Mhm.
filled both roles, but so you said you were kind of handling some of the special education, or you
Mhm.
were the special ed contact, which I know that
Yep.
again, depending on the size of the district, sometimes they have an assistant principal and a special ed person. So we've talked a lot about good teaching habits and people who are
Mhm.
open and want you to come in. What about the teachers who are a little more hesitant to the feedback or are not sure about the accommodations? Just because I've had situations where it's like, you're asking somebody to change their teaching practices, which is sometimes necessary, especially if you have students who need supports. So, like how did you handle that, and how do you think about those situations where the teachers are less less open to other people coming in and observing, or less open to differentiating and trying different things for their students?
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting because once I moved from the public school model into the Catholic schools, you kind of become the point person. You're the judge,
For
jury, and
everything.
executioner of everything. And
Yeah.
again, the Catholic school model. Okay, so and it's a really different mode in terms of how it's delivered because in public school model, my district where county was a huge county, and then I went to a very small Catholic school where you didn't have all the resources, so you had to be a little more creative with those things. So I would say in both situations the question you have to get to is what's holding this person back.
Hmm.
Okay. And the question you always ask is this a can't or won't? Is this
Mm-hmm.
person
Yeah.
they can't do it, they don't have the skills to do it, or they're just flat out refusing to do it. Okay. Now, if it's the latter, then we're having a different conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you're just saying, yeah, I'm just not going to do those things, it's like, well, no, that doesn't work here. But if it's they can't do it, what's holding them back from doing it? Sometimes maybe they had a really bad experience as a teacher that has carried over with them for 15 years. Okay. Maybe they had a bad situation with a principal that didn't go real well, where they had a kid in their class that they didn't get along with, or maybe a parent made them feel uncomfortable in terms of the things that they were asking to do for to the hey, we need this, and you're thinking, well, but the accommodations only say I'm supposed to do these things. We had a pushy parent and made them little PTSD on those things. So
Yeah.
to me, the big thing I'm looking at is to get to that root cause of why. If it's not a won't, okay, and we're going to assume that it's not, because as we've said, if it's no, I'm just not going to do that, then that's a whole different conversation. But if
Right.
it's a can't, my question is, what's the root cause of the why? And a lot of times it's fear. And it's I'm in my comfort zone here. I know how to do this. I'm comfortable doing it this way, and now you're asking me to do it this way. Um, and it's something I see a lot with like teachers who like to have everybody in straight rows facing forward. And you say, well, have you tried to do centers? Or have you tried to do group work or things like that? Oh no, because then we have to move the desks. And you're going, who cares? You move them
Yeah.
back, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world, okay? But just getting him to do something that simple as let the kids work in group work rather than just stand up there and drill and kill kind of things, it's like just try it. Just try, and sometimes guess what? It doesn't go well. And that's okay because
Yeah.
you tried it for the first time. Okay. You and I both know we both do podcasts. Okay. I'm gonna guess the first podcast you ever did was bordering on terrifying in terms of like, oh my gosh, is anybody gonna listen to this? Is anybody gonna hear
Yeah.
it? Am I gonna sound silly? Am I gonna but you did it.
Hmm.
And then after you did it the first time, you did a second one. And then you did a third one. And now it's like probably like riding a bike for you, okay, to jump on a podcast and record one. And it's the same thing with trying something different as a teacher. The first time you're going to try it, you're out of your comfort zone. But are there things that oh yeah, I really liked that part of it. Okay, I didn't care for this part. It's okay, so leave that part behind. Let's focus on this part. One of the things I asked teachers after COVID ended was I said, okay, we all just did COVID where, and I'm not sure anybody really was like, oh, I loved COVID. You know what I mean? I love the
Yeah.
way I had to
Yeah.
teach during COVID. Okay.
Yeah.
But one of the questions was if you kind of do the audit of what you did as a teacher during COVID, what are some things that you realize I was doing this and I didn't have to do it? I didn't
Hmm.
have to do these things. I can leave those behind in the year
Yeah.
2020. Okay. But here's my second question is what did you learn during COVID, maybe from using some new strategies that you say, you know what, that really worked well. I think I'm going to keep doing that.
Hmm.
Okay. So, and if you really think about that as a teacher, what do I not need to do anymore? And what should I keep doing?
Hmm.
You're going to find that that's really a big piece of the growth right there. So, to me, that's where it really is really getting to that root cause of what it is that's holding them back. What's the why? Do they not have the skills for it? Okay, if you don't have the skills, let's find them. Let's do some professional development together. Let's find somebody that does. Let's pair you up with another teacher that can maybe show you those things. But then it goes into when you have those goals at the beginning of the year, it goes back to that. What are your goals for this year? Well, if it's all the things you're already good at, you're probably not going to have a lot of growth as a teacher, but maybe focus on one thing that's not a strong suit for you. And let's dive into that. And especially if there's good communication within your school, the needs and the
Hmm.
that your kids are going to have, so you can carry those over to say, okay, we know that if one of our kids is going to need this, there's probably 25 more that are going to need this as well. How do we make that part of our culture? How do we
Hmm.
give these kids this? Because everybody's going to benefit from them.
Right. Yeah. So when you're thinking about we're talking about professional development and peer support and professional learning communities and all the different ways that you can grow professionally because we
Mhm.
obviously have sometimes you can bring in somebody who does a training and then you can do follow-ups to that and you can have an ongoing work group and all kinds of different ways that we can learn and grow. And I'm curious how that looked for you, especially just being the person who was thinking about special ed and maybe working with some of those additional service providers that could also be support for the teachers or each other. What that was like when you went from the public school to the private school and how that looks different when you compare the two of those
Yeah,
types of schools.
I think in the public school, we had a lot of students who had learning differences. A lot of students with IEPs, anything from speech to more intense educational needs that required more services. And but at the end of the day, they're all kids. They're kids who are coming to us for an education. Okay. And so to me, it was our responsibility to make sure that we were doing that. Now, sometimes you have to have those courageous conversations with parent to kind of say, listen, I'm not sure this environment is the best because we're not able to provide the support that
Mhm.
this child needs. And those are
Like
hard
in the private
conversations.
school?
Both. I mean, but
Yeah.
even sometimes in a Catholic school, or I'm sorry, in a public school, you have to say, listen, maybe this resource center might be a little better for the kid who, is nonverbal and we just don't have the support that we can give. But this school here, that's our neighboring
Mhm.
school right down the
Right.
road, has this center that focuses specifically on students with this disability, and
Hmm.
that's all they do.
Right.
Okay.
Hmm.
And it's there's a reservation. Oh, I don't know, because obviously you want to have the kids in the least restrictive, but sometimes that's just the best thing for
Sometimes,
that child.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
I'm going to take a quick break here to talk about the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers design programming and interventions to support students' executive functioning in school settings. Social skills groups are often seen as the entire intervention. And when they're delivered this way, they're often done in an academic format where an adult is leading the session and kids are answering questions or discussing various social rules and scenarios. This is a very small piece of what needs to happen. When we think of social skills intervention as just a lesson plan or social skills group, kids get really good at answering questions about how they should be acting in hypothetical situations. However, they often don't transfer any of those things over to real life. This is because real social interactions are not academic situations. We're actually not working on the skills preventing kids from using the information and knowledge we're trying to give them. In other words, we're not building the executive functioning skills kids need to be successful in social situations, not to mention other areas of life. Before you can successfully implement social skills intervention, you need to have a solid understanding of what executive functioning is, both the internal skills and the external behaviors, what successful intervention looks like and who needs to be involved, and what service delivery models can effectively address executive functioning. This is exactly what I show you how to do in the School of Clinical Leadership. In the program, you'll learn why kids continue to experience anxiety or behavioral challenges even though they're going to therapy or have a behavior plan, common mistakes multidisciplinary teams make when teaching executive functioning, and how to correct these mistakes, why kids struggle with problem solving and friendships even though they're going to pull out therapy and social skills groups, and most importantly, how to help your team work together to figure out solutions to all of these things. If you are in a related service provider role, if you're a speech pathologist, social worker, counselor, psychologist, occupational therapist, or other professional on a school team supporting students, you can emerge into a leadership role on your team and help to guide these interventions. I help you do that in the School of Clinical Leadership. To learn more about the program, you can go to drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership. Sometimes inclusion is like being included in the general ed classroom is the least restrictive, but sometimes the least restrictive environment is being in that special school or classroom.
And you would have kids all the time where we come in with an IEP, a parent would come in with an IEP and say, listen, this is what this IEP from the public school has. And as a Catholic school, there are things maybe we can't offer because I just don't have the services for those. Okay.
Right.
You said, listen, we can do 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we're going to create a plan, and we're going to tell you what we can do. Now, you as a parent, now it's your choice. Okay. You can go to the public school and you can get these 10 things, or maybe you can come to this Catholic school and you're going to get these 5 things. Now you got to weigh it. What's a more important thing to you? The smaller class sizes, where you're going to get these 5 things, and hey, these 3 things maybe we can do outside of the house, things like that. You have other Catholic schools that might be out there where you say, listen, the public schools are offering these 10 things, and I can offer you these 15 things. And you go, wow, okay, this is even better to come here. So it just depends. Each school is going to have their own things that they can offer. I think one of the things I used to see in both public and Catholic schools, when you talk about professional development, is, and it's a mistake I think a lot of schools make, is it's like, well, we gave you a training on this, and therefore you know it. And it's like, no.
I have that conversation at work all the time, and not in the schools, in social services, where I'm like, just because you fire hosted me for 2 days in that lecture format doesn't mean I know what I'm doing.
Exactly. I mean, you gotta, if you're going to make that a priority in what it is that's going to be your focus. And I'll give you a prime example of this one. A lot of us Catholic schools may not have a resource program right now. And I think it's becoming more and more of a something that we're seeing a lot more of now, because people recognize there's a need for this. And if we're going to provide, we're going to be a Catholic, to me, a Catholic school, it should be for all kids. And we want to make sure that we can welcome all kids into our Catholic schools, as long as we can provide them the services. But it's you can't just wake up one morning and go, hey, we're going to have a resource program here as a Catholic school. Okay. You don't click your heels together 3 times. Okay. And boom, you have a Catholic.
People don't understand that, how long it takes to develop a program. And it's so frustrating where they're like, why can't you just, or like having a new curriculum, or like when we think about digital versus like physical books and, all of those things, like, what does it take when you have a new curriculum for the teachers and the staff, and new materials you have to deliver and procure and train people to use? Like, again,
and it's 6 to 8 months out before you're even like, and to me, I think that's one of the things that I would see is that, for us, like at the schools I was at, 2 of them, we developed resource programs that started from scratch and nothing. Okay. And it was, okay, first we're going to start saying this is what's happening. Okay. And then you and I both know you're going to have the majority of your teachers are going to say, yes, this is great, let's do it. You can have a couple that are going to go, wait a minute, I don't know if I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
But you're also going to
that's not the way we do things.
That's not the way we do things. It's not. But here's the other thing too, is you also are going to get some pushback from some parents. you're
Oh,
going to say, well,
yeah.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
I thought this. And that's when you have to have that conversation of, we're a Catholic school. We're not a private school. Okay. And our goal as a Catholic school is to make sure that we can welcome every single student that we can serve into our building. Okay. And
So
guess
did you
what?
say
That
so
doesn't,
Catholic school versus private school or Catholic school versus public school?
well, I say
Is
both,
it
but
is there a
to me, a
distinction to
Catholic school,
you?
yeah, well, to me, yeah, because a private school, you're able to say, I mean, I think a lot of our private schools are, listen, we want everybody to finish head of their class. Everybody's going to go and,
Yeah, so they're a private school
okay,
with a specific
correct,
academic
correct, yeah,
or
maybe a
like
STEM focus
area.
or things
Okay,
like that,
yeah.
yeah.
That's interesting.
For
Okay. Yeah,
versus to
that
me, a
makes
Catholic school, we're founded on the faith.
oh,
That should
okay.
be where the center of things are for us.
Mhm.
And if we are putting the faith at the back of who we are, that makes us a private school. Okay, I'm sorry,
Okay.
but that's got to be the kind of
Okay.
the beating of the drum right
Interesting.
there. So,
Hmm.
so I think but what we have to say is, okay, now this is who we are, and you have to put a name on it, and you have to be willing to take those questions, and you got to stand by it. Okay,
Hmm.
if you're just gonna, fade away very quickly with the first couple of gripes that you get about saying, "Hey, we're gonna do this," it's probably not going to be a very successful program at your school, and it's not going to become part of your culture. So, to me, year one is actually saying you're going to do it, and actually starting to get that training in of what that looks like, but
Hmm.
also seeing where your faculty is right now. I did a really great podcast, one of my first ones. I'm sure I'm terrible in it. I will just tell you because it was one of my first podcasts with Dr. Dana Coyle, who is a guru when it comes to special education. And we were talking about this, and we kind of said, it's a 3-year process. Year one
Yeah.
is, kind of saying that, hey, we're going to do this and start figuring out where everybody is and start to, provide that professional development piece of things. Year two kind of starts to say, okay, now we're going to start getting into this. Maybe we're going to make our first hires. Maybe we're going to, maybe in the first year toward the latter part of the year, one of the schools, like for the second half of the year, I hired our first resource teacher to kind of start getting people going on that. And then in year two, it's like, all right, now we're going to, this is what our need is. We're going to, put our money into that. And by year three, it should be part of who you are. But also by year three, this as well as I do, the folks that aren't on board, they're probably saying, we're out at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, sometimes it's like, all right, here's where the
Yeah.
bus is leaving. Get on or not.
Well, that's
Yeah.
it. And I'm
Yeah.
not mad at you. If you want to, say, hey, I'm getting off at this stop, that's okay.
Hmm.
Doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that you're not on board with the direction of school. And sometimes that's really hard because you'd have teachers that were very popular who would say, I'm going to jump off here. And person, why are you letting this person leave? And you can't say because they're not on board with this. But
Yeah.
it's okay. That doesn't make them a bad person. Doesn't mean I'm mad at you. Doesn't mean I don't like you. But I think it's important. And I think one of the things that gets principals in trouble is when they don't clearly state that, and people aren't sure where you're going, and
Yeah.
then they're kind of creating their own ending for the story, and it's not really what the story looks like from the principal's eyes, and then that
Hmm.
creates chaos.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
think to me that's
Hmm.
really important. If you're going to do this and you're going to do it right, you can't shy away from it, and you can't be afraid of it, and you can't be uh, whatever the word you might use is. I mean, you got to say I'm all in on this,
Hmm.
and this is who we're going to become. But here's the other thing too: once you hit that year three, your school is going to be such a better place for it. Okay. Your school will be such a better school when you are for everybody.
Hmm.
I can't tell you what it adds to your school. So I would just say anybody out there that's thinking about that, or anybody that's got that fear, first off is that's what you want to do it. But have the plan, and
Hmm.
don't be afraid of it, and be ready to have a couple of people, grouse at you a little bit, or
Hmm.
but have your why, and be able to have that conversation with anybody that walks into your office and say, nope, this is why we're doing this, and this is how it's going to make us better as a school, and this is how it's going to benefit these kids.
Hmm. Yeah. I think what people also need to hear is that it is a 3-year process to
Yeah.
start new programming. And I think just people who are not necessarily in the the decision maker role, but maybe they are in the role of delivering the services or maybe collaborating with the schools to just the patience. And I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've had when I transitioned into a leadership role is that you really have to you have to have the big goals, but you have to also really appreciate the steps to get there and the smaller wins and realize that some of these steps, like the hiring of the resource teacher or coming up with the plan or whatever it is, like getting your marketing strategy down or like all these different benchmarks to just really appreciate those things. Because I know that, some people who aren't necessarily maybe in an administrator role, like you kind of don't realize how big of a project some of these things are. And it's like you want to change the world and do everything.
Yep.
And instead of saying, well, you can't change anything if you're trying to do all of it. And so just even
Yes.
saying, you know what, we're gonna start a resource program that's a big deal. So just having an
Yeah.
appreciation for what that means and how much work that is and just celebrating the
And I
small
will
wins.
100%. And I will tell you one of the things that probably a lot of people may not realize. If you're not in the role of a Catholic school principal, I'll give you even a little bit more in depth. When I was in a public school, every year the county would say to us, "Okay, these are the kids that you have that have IEPs or that have
Hmm.
needs or things like that, 504s. As a result, we as a county are going to send you six special education teachers, and it's your
Hmm.
job at the school to decide how you're dividing them up."
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or they might say, we're going to give you six teachers and four assistants. And it's your job to figure out, because guess what? You might have one student who needs an aide with them full time.
Yeah.
And so now one of your people is with that kid the whole day. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so you've got to kind of figure that out. In a Catholic school, the flip side of that is if I'm going to say I'm going to start a resource program, I got to be able to pay for it. Okay.
Hmm.
So when we say it's a 3-year process, you've got to start including that in your budget ahead of time that you're adding a faculty member.
Hmm.
Okay. And if your tuition costs, so let's just say $10,000, I'm just use it for round numbers, but your budget is 10 students under your enrollment target for your budget, now you're $100,000 in the bad.
Hmm.
You're already saying I'm going to add a teacher at, I don't know, $50,000, whatever number it might be. So now I'm $150,000 behind that I've got to find to make this happen.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, that's a thing. Okay. Now, obviously it's a much better thing to say, listen, I'm 10 kids over enrollment and I wanted to add this, so now you're coming out on the other side of it. But that's the piece of things I think a lot of Catholics that folks don't realize about Catholic schools is you are really functioning as a CEO. You have to work on the marketing, the budgeting, the
Yeah. That's
enrollment.
interesting.
There's a big piece of that you've got to be able to afford, because you can't go in the red on that.
Hmm.
Okay, which is where the schools that I work with, we're working on advancement dollars that you can count on. We're working on recruitment strategies to make sure that you're finishing 20 kids over your enrollment target as opposed to 10 kids under it. Because you think about that one in public school, if you're 20 kids under what your enrollment projected was, we just keep on moving. In a Catholic school, if you're 10 kids under your enrollment, now you've got to make up $100,000 somewhere, which is then when schools get into trouble, because then they got to say, okay, well, I'm going to cut my art program. Well,
Hmm.
what if I was there because I liked art or
Right.
band or music or whatever? Now
Yeah.
we're going to cut that.
That's
Okay. Now you have 10 more kids who leave because we're not doing a band program anymore. Okay. Well, now you got to make up another $100,000. And then you're going to increase your tuition cost to cover it by 5%. Well, now you have people say, I can't afford this anymore. So
hmm.
there's such a balance to this when you're a Catholic school principal, because so much of your job is on that business side of education,
Hmm.
that you have to be thinking about this, what it looks like 3 years down the road. And you're the one setting what's going on at your school. In a public school, we would get every year, hey, their focus this year is going to be on this, or we're gonna spend a lot of time on this. I remember, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but I remember the county I was in. The focus the one year was we're going to do no child or the response to intervention, RTI.
Okay.
Okay, before
Hey,
RTI was a thing.
yeah.
Okay, we
So,
were
so
doing
this was
RTI.
before RTI. So, because I like to say
Yes.
I went through Catholic school RTI before RTI was a thing because I
Yep.
had to get extra reading help. So I went to, would go with Sister Marie and do
Yeah.
extra reading. And so I would have been a Catholic school RTI person when I was
Hmm.
in elementary school. But yeah, it was RTI when I was in the schools as well with
Yeah.
my first SLP position. So I guess I'm
Yeah.
dating myself too. But
Yeah, I remember sitting
anyways,
through, and
continue.
you remember as well, probably sitting through those, and you're kind of going, because we were
Like,
doing,
how
and I
are we going to
give
do
our
this?
county, well, yeah, and I give the county a lot of credit that we were in is they were on this before it was even, mandated kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And then once it did get to that point, we were like, oh, we're already doing this. It was just part of
hmm
who we are, okay?
yeah,
And so I really appreciated that aspect, and it really gave me a good perspective as a principal later on in life to kind of go, okay, we need to be looking. If you're standing in the ocean and you're on the shore, the wave that's going to hit you is already there.
hmm
Okay, you're either going to get you either got to go through it, or it's too late to go over it, or things like that. It's going to crash on top of you. But you need to be looking out 2 to 3 waves. Oh, I better move up a little bit. Oh, I better move back a little bit. Oh, this
hmm
one's going to hit right here. I better go through the wave. I better. Oh, I can ride this wave. This looks fun. Um, you start to look as a principal 3 to 4 waves out, so to speak, to make sure that your school is in a good position. That when that wave hits, we just wasn't even a thing for us. We just
yeah,
kept right on going, kind of thing.
hmm
So
hmm
you really start to look outward and really start to figure out where you're going, and that's where that importance come in, because you do have to. You can't just say, "Hey, we're going to have a resource program. We're going to hire 5 new teachers." Okay, well, how are you going to pay for them?
hmm
Okay, what does that look like?
yeah,
And so there's a big piece of it. So when I say a 3-year process, it really is, because there is also, in addition to training your faculty on what they need to be doing, there's also the thing of, okay, how are we going to pay for this?
yeah.
And you have to look at all those different things right there.
So I think what I'm taking away from this, which is like when I've talked with other people before that maybe haven't been the people who are having to think about the financial decisions.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's different if you're in a Catholic school, in a charter school, in a public school, in a private school. All of the way that the money gets funneled through different places and where it comes from is different. But what frustrates me is that sometimes people will say, well, it's all about the money. It's just a business. Yeah, it is a business. How else are we going to offer services
Right.
if we can't keep the lights on? Like if you can't, your bathrooms are falling apart and the facilities aren't safe for kids and there's asbestos in the buildings, or you can't pay your teachers. Like there's all this, like people are saying, hey, teachers should be paid more. Well, how can they be paid more, and how can principals support them and bring in the right training and do, like, again, fund the program? How can you do that if you don't focus on the financial aspect? And so yeah, again, I guess that's what I'm taking away from this, is that yeah, it is about the money, but it's about the money because the money helps you deliver the services for the students and do it in a way that allows you to support the staff as well, which I know is all of those things easier said than done.
And I think this is where, as a principal, the biggest thing, and I always say this, I say you need to have curb appeal,
hmm
consistency, and communication.
hmm
If you have those 3 things at your school, if when people see your newsletter, if it has typos and misspellings and wrong dates or wrong
hmm
information, okay, your curb appeal to the parent reading that is they don't know what they're doing. Okay. If
Yeah.
when you walk up into the school, there's the door at the front is not locking properly, or I don't know, whatever. There's graffiti in the
hmm
bathrooms, or I don't know, whatever. It sends a message.
hmm
Okay. If you're inconsistent in your policies, it sends a message. But this is
hmm
the biggest thing in terms of what you're communicating as a leader. If you're communicating out clearly what your vision for your school is, and people are hearing that vision over and over in a variety of ways. Okay. You can't just say, well, I said it was in the newsletter.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. What if people
was it
don't read the
newsletter
newsletter?
once?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if I missed that episode? What if I missed
hmm
that issue? So to me, one of the things we used to do every week was we would have a communications meeting, and we would literally sit down and go, okay, 4 weeks out, we're looking at what are our different means of communication. We have a newsletter, we do a social media, we do a parish bulletin, we do a Sunday night call out. What are all the different things that we communicate? what needs to be in those? Okay. What are the things that we need to highlight in those things to make sure everybody knows what's going on? Okay. And when you're communicating those things out to people clearly, consistently, so that everybody knows what's going on, everybody knows if we're going to raise tuition by 5%, this is why we're raising tuition by 5%. Hey, 3% of that is going to go toward our teacher salaries so that we can give them a raise of X% this year. 1% is going to go to fund this, or hey, our cost for health insurance went up by this. Now, there is a thing, because I know there's probably somebody out there going, oh yeah, if you get into that level of detail, it's going to get picked apart. I don't disagree with you on that one. You don't need to say, hey, because it was like when we would do a fundraiser and you'd say, well, hey, we raised $10,000 to put a new playground in it or whatever. And you break down the cost and go, well, the screws cost us, $200. Somebody will come in and go, I could have got those for you for 180. And you go, okay, hold on. We're not going to split hairs to that extent.
Right.
But you just do need to communicate what that vision is over and over and over. And I once heard somebody say that you're doing a good job as a principal and as a leader when people can almost make like they can imitate you as a leader, okay? Because they've heard it so many times that they get it. I had a chance to interview an old college tennis teammate of mine, Kirby Hasselman, and his book was called Delivering Marketing Joy. And he said he knew that he was doing a good job when he was with some friends, and he told him he's got to get going because he's got to get up early the next day. And somebody said, yep, you got to go deliver more marketing joy. And he said, okay, I must be doing something because people know what it is that I'm doing.
They can say they're on message, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, and then you have a brand. Okay. And then you have a brand right there. But I think I will say this too, because we've talked a lot about implementing these things. Here's the other side of this. And it's very ironic because in the article that I just wrote recently, it was titled Slow Down. Okay. And I think what happens is sometimes schools try to get it rushed rather than get it right. And so my challenge, I guess, to school leaders out there is, if this is something you want to do it right. Okay. Don't do it rushed. Don't just do it to say, listen, we got to have this in place by January 1st or else we're going to be in trouble. Now, if your roof is leaking, yes, get that fixed immediately. Okay. That's something you got to get done rushed. Okay. But if you're implementing a program like this, because we all know we implement a program where we try to, and we don't think it through and we rush it and it doesn't go well. And everybody goes, well, last time we did this, it didn't work. So I don't know why we're doing it this way. I don't know why we're doing it again. It didn't work last time. Okay. So number one is I would say slow down, get it done right. I think Reagan used to say to his people that if you have an idea and you bring an idea to me, make sure you bring it in 3 reasons why it won't work. And until you can tell me 3 reasons why it won't work, you haven't thought it through enough. Okay. It's a very interesting perspective. Okay.
It is. So, well, it's risk mitigation, really. Like, what's the worst possible scenario that could happen if I do this? And what's the I don't know, it's the Tim Ferriss fear setting. Like, what am I afraid? Like, define your fears instead of define your goals. Maybe it's in the same category as that activity, but yeah.
But and I think too is be realistic with your timelines. Okay. If it is, I mean, the time we're recording this, if you're going to say, listen, 2 months, we're going to have a resource program in place. I'm going to tell you, you're probably going to have a lot of frustrated people, you included. Okay. You as the person who's doing it included. Okay. Slow down, think it through, get it right. And guess what? If it takes you an extra month to get it done right, take the extra month. Because if this is going to be something that you're going to be implementing and making it part of your culture, why would you want to get it rushed? Do it right. Do it right the first time. I heard a guy once say, buy it nice or buy it twice. And I thought that was a great way of looking at it, because if you try to go the cheap way of it and try just to get it done, I guarantee you're going to be doing it again. So buy it nice or buy it twice kind of thing, and just do it right the first time. But that's really where communicating and getting that consistency and communication so that people can hear your messaging over and over and over again. And then just make your priority. Like I said, we used to always say in the Catholic schools, you can tell what's important by where you spend your time and where you spend your money. So I would
agree with that.
If that's a priority, look into it. So I think when it comes into overpromising, I think one of the dangers with that is that schools oftentimes will overpromise and underdeliver, and then everybody's disappointed.
Yep.
And to me, I think it's more going to be a bigger feather in your cap to be able to say, listen, we're going to do these things and create realistic timelines and over deliver and under promise is going to give you a lot more street cred. And so I think when you're able to do that, it just creates a good thing. One of the things I always say to people is I say, listen, do 3 things a year. Pick 3 things that are going to be your focus for that year. Because if you do 10 and you accomplish 8 of them, the only thing anybody's ever going to talk about is the 2 that you didn't meet.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do 2 to 3 and you get really good at them and make them part of your culture, now you're over delivering on what you've said you're going to do, which just creates trust in you as a leader.
Yeah, that's hard to do. Hard to focus when you're an ambitious person.
Indeed, most certainly. But that's where it said, slow down, get it right, don't get it rushed.
So I'm curious because for people who are, I know sometimes if you're not involved with the nuts and the bolts of implementing something, it's really frustrating, especially if you're like, why is it taking so long to get this program in place? Or, and I've been in some situations where it has appeared to me like the leadership may be overpromised. And then again, it's kind of the buy it nice or buy it twice. They're having to disappoint people because they didn't have realistic expectations. But at the same time, when you say, oh, wow, this is going to take 3 years or whatever, it's frustrating because people are like, why is it going to take so long? I'm thinking about the staff, the parents, and everyone. So like, how do you communicate and set appropriate expectations, especially when maybe it's something that people really want to be in place and they're anxiously waiting for like a resource program or whatever it is that you're implementing, a new curriculum or, and I can think of a number of different examples.
Yeah.
Like, how do you course correct if maybe you have, estimated your timeline incorrectly and now you have to tell people it's going to take longer, or when maybe you do estimate it correctly and people are saying, why is it going to take so long? Why can't we have it now?
Well, and I think that's where your communication comes in.
Yeah.
I think that also before this even hits air, you've got to have that core leadership team that you are going to have that conversation with to say, this is what we're thinking we're going to do. This is what we want to do. And let's have conversations now about where you see, hit me with what you don't like about this or what you don't think is going to work about this, or maybe you have people that have been there longer than you that go, listen, I'm just letting you know that we tried this about 6 years ago and it was a dumpster fire. Okay, tell me why it didn't work then.
Yeah.
Well, this. Okay, well, let's get into why it didn't work and let's learn from it, because you might be trying to bring something in there and you say, listen, this is my vision of this. And they go, listen, we have tried this 5 different times. Each time it has gotten worse. Now you know to navigate that, okay? Or maybe your culture isn't ready for that yet, okay? And we need to take a little bit more time to kind of prime the well on that one. But I think that's where having a good leadership team that is willing to be open and honest, but also as a leader, you're willing to be vulnerable to listen to their feedback, okay? I once had a leadership team that I said, we're going to do this, something that we were going to do at the beginning of the year and to welcome back our faculty. And I had talked to each of our leadership team members beforehand. I said, hey, we're thinking about this individually. And they were like, yes, it's a great idea. Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Yes, it's a great idea. And we got them all in the group together. I said, okay, I've talked to each of you that we said we're going to do this. And the one person who I didn't get to talk to prior to that, she said, that's a terrible idea. And I said, well, what don't you like about it? And she said, well, if we do that, this, and this are going to happen. And the other members of the group went, I thought about that too. Yeah, I thought about that too. And I said, then why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to hurt your feelings because you were really excited about it. Okay.
Interesting.
Well, then that created a whole other conversation. That's a mistake you make as a young administrator, is you think like, because it's your vision, everybody's just going to jump on board with it. Well, that led to some other conversations about how we can need to be open and honest with each other before we can really dive into things. So, but that helped me over the next 15 years as an administrator. So I think, to me, in terms of those things of getting people on board, but having that just constant communication, and just putting it out there for people to be able to know exactly where it is that you're going. And just like I said, slow down. It doesn't have to be done tomorrow. But just know where those things are and know where those roadblocks might be. Because if I know where those roadblocks are going to be, I'm more prepared to handle them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, I know we could keep going, but we're
I
getting close to
know.
the
I
time that we
know.
need to
Wow,
wrap up.
it's
So
too much good conversation here.
I
No,
know.
it's awesome.
Well,
So, but I appreciate what you're doing.
where can people go to learn more about you and what you do and listen to your podcast?
Yeah, so my podcast is called the Catholic School Leaders Podcast. It is on all platforms. If you go to elementaryadvancement.com, that's my website. Talks a lot about the different services that I have, and there's also links on there to the podcast that I do. I'm also on LinkedIn, very much on LinkedIn. So if you are on LinkedIn and you want to connect with me, either at Elementary Advancement Solutions or my name, John Mihalyo, I'll send you a link to my LinkedIn page. I would love to connect with you and just continue learning from each other. That's one of the things I know we were talking about before is it's just how many different people
Yeah.
we meet
Mm-hmm.
professionally
Yep.
that we've never been in the
Absolutely.
same room with, but we're
I
able to
know.
collaborate with
I hope that
one
I
time.
do get to,
I
like, again,
know.
I'm just trying to think of how many of my podcast guests have I actually met in
Yes.
person. It's not very many, so hopefully need to
But I
change
think
that.
that's one thing that COVID did tell us is we don't have to be in the same room with people to learn and grow with them.
Yeah. Yeah,
The mastermind groups
absolutely.
that I run, one of the services I offer is mastermind groups for principals, advancement directors, enrollment directors, and aspiring administrators. And it's funny because not only are they not in the same city, some of them, they're not even in the same country.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah,
mastermind
absolutely.
folks from Australia and Canada and the United States. So everybody's just growing together. And what you be surprised with is probably 98% of the things that we talk about are applicable to all
Yeah.
schools in all different areas. So
That is interesting
it's a great
how
way to
that
learn
works.
from each other right there. So I would say that's one of the things I really do is really try to connect other people because I know one of the things as a Catholic school principal that I never had or you had to really search for was just to have those resources at your fingertips to say this is going to help me immediately or something I can do on my own,
Hmm.
and I don't have to wait for somebody to bring it to me. So
Hmm.
it's a great podcast to binge. A lot of great guests on there, a lot of great episodes, including one with uh,
Yes, where we talk about executive
yes, we
functioning.
talked about
So,
executive
yeah,
functioning, and so what an awesome list.
we'll link to
Yeah,
that
so
interview as well in the show notes
most
so
certainly.
people can
So,
listen to it.
but yeah,
All
but I
right.
appreciate it. And so I'd love to hear from you out there if I can help your school grow in any way or really help you to just get where you want to be. I'd love
Hmm.
to help you. And that's something I'm really passionate about doing. I just like to work with smaller numbers of schools and really focus on what it is that you're doing to give you that individual attention.
Yeah. Well, sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to check the show notes for all the resources that were mentioned in this episode. And be sure to check out the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers put executive functioning support in place in collaboration with their school teams using multiple service delivery models. So I show you how to do direct intervention, and I also show you how to coach and train others so that you can ensure students get support across their day. Remember that it helps me so much if you tell your friends and colleagues about De Facto Leaders, and if you follow me and leave me a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether you listen on Apple or Spotify or another podcast network. And finally, if you're interested in collaborating with me, if you'd like to invite me to be on your podcast, if you would like to be a guest on De Facto Leaders, or if you have a suggestion for a guest for De Facto Leaders, please email me at talktome@drkarenspeech.com. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.